Welcome today to the ACHCA mentoring webinar to talk about getting off to a good start with a foundational coverage of how the program works. One of the signature areas of the American College of Healthcare Administrators is this mentoring program. I'm also very pleased today to introduce a colleague of mine that I have a lot of respect for, Scott Lester, who has also been very involved in the development of the mentoring program.
I teach an MBA level course on mentoring. I do some research in mentoring, and recently our college has recognized me with an award for mentoring our junior faculty. So I'm really excited to be part of the program and excited to share this curriculum with you. Before we get too far into the webinar, I'm going to turn back over to Doug so he can tell you a little bit about the history of the program and how we're trying to expand its reach.
So the first thing we're going to start out with is just a clear statement that the ACHCA mentoring program is truly a signature program uniquely developed and put forward by this professional association that represents individuals across the country that are in this profession. The history of the National Mentoring Program began way back in 2008. And actually, the recognition and credit for this program really belongs to the fellows of the American College of Healthcare Administrators. They spent a lot of time and deliberation with me to put together a program that tried to hit a sweet spot between formality and informality, and I think they did an incredible job in getting this off to a great start. We were also very, very fortunate to get a grant commitment from Life Care Centers of America in 2011. So the framework for the National Mentoring Program was established, and the first class was introduced in 2012 in Nashville at the convocation. Each subsequent mentoring class at the national level was introduced at the convocation, and that is still a history and tradition that carries forward today. We've had a number of different classes that have been of various sizes over the years. The inaugural class of 2012 had 20 pairs. Today, we're pleased to report with the leadership and guidance of the Mentoring Committee that we have 41 pairs across the country this year alone. Let me turn to the goals of the Mentoring Initiative for a second. This signature program was really established to help make sure that emerging leaders in the field were better prepared to handle the changes in the profession and have resources to help navigate through that. It's also really been something that is a tool and a resource to facilitate some conversation and succession planning efforts as many administrators in the field were nearing retirement. They also called forward the important member benefit and making sure that people understood that part of the mentoring program was a continuous learning between not only the mentor and the protege, but the entire profession itself. These goals really captured the spirit and heart of the program that is carried through today. We've done a couple things, and one of those things is really kind of try to put together requirements for not only the mentor, but the fellow that is going to be serving in that role. Each of those fellows are committed going into the program to have at least an hour a month dedicated to making sure this relationship can work. The fellows that have been selected to be participating in the mentor program have also been asked to attend designated mentoring sessions where we have at some point a mentoring certificate that's given out to them after so many continuing ed credits. We're also, as you can tell today, we're updating the mentoring course, and we want to make sure that everybody that is part of the program participates from both ends as a mentor or protege in the course to make sure that there's a clear, solid foundation for them to participate in. One thing I want to pay special attention to is that the decision of the American College of Healthcare Administrators to establish that fellows made the best mentors was a really important choice back as we started the program. Fellows are recognized for having a tradition of service, giving back, learning, and high energy and interest in what they do for the profession. Let me turn to the protege for a moment, because we also spent some time taking a hard look at what would be good candidates for the proteges that we would want involved in this program. First, both the mentor and the protege need to be ACHCA members. As a protege, you really need to be in the early stages of your career as an administrator. Although clearly distinct from the mentoring program, this is not a job search aid, but is more for people that are practicing or about to practice and are really interested in making sure they have a good resource to help guide them through that. Proteges as well as mentors have the requirements of attending learning and experiencing a webinar like this. There's also the expectation that they'll be involved in the e-learning course throughout the time period that we're going to be having things available through ACHCA and as part of this program. One of the things you're going to also see for both the mentor and protege, ACHCA, under the guidance of their staff and the direction of the steering committee, has a regular approach of reaching out to make sure that mentors and proteges are having a good experience with their relationship, and that is done on a semi-annual and annual basis with the program support from ACHCA. Now let me turn it back to my colleague Scott, who will talk a little bit more about some of the important elements to make sure that you're getting off to a good start in this relationship.
Thanks, Doug. As Doug mentioned, one of the keys to having an effective mentoring relationship is getting off to a good start. A lot of research on mentoring shows that if those first few meetings together, if you can establish a good relationship, establish some goals, it really helps facilitate the rest of the time together. Other considerations with the matching process, one of the most important things is location. Now, while I recognize with technological advancements, it's real easy to do a video conference call, a FaceTime, Skype, whatever, the feedback that we got from our first 2 or 3 classes of the mentoring cohorts, mentoring relationships work best when there's an opportunity to meet face-to-face. So one part of the matching process is they're going to try to connect you with someone in the field that's close enough to you geographically that you can get together from time to time as you work toward your goals. A second area that is important is you need to have a good comfort level with your mentor or protege. And what we mean by that, do your personalities match? Do you feel comfortable around that individual? Do you feel like you can trust that person? Because if you don't feel that you can trust someone, you're not going to feel comfortable fully disclosing some of the challenges you're facing as a new administrator in the field. The final thing that we look at is to what extent do you and your mentoring partner have similar expectations for the relationship? Obviously, any relationship where both parties are getting benefit from that relationship, they're going to be more invested in it. One thing that we do at the beginning of each mentoring class is we have mentors and proteges get together, get their expectations down on paper, and then see how they match up. Now, one thing that we've done as the program has evolved, rather than having the mentor and protege have an official start at convocation, we now have an enrollment process where you and your partner can get together and start up at any time during the year. But what I'd like you to do now is take a minute to write down, get out a sheet of paper, something you can write on, and write down both what you expect to give to the mentoring relationship and also what you expect to receive from that relationship. After you've written this information down, what you're going to do is you're going to find time to meet with your mentoring partner, be it they're your mentor or they're your protege. And what you're going to do is you're just going to share your expectations. Not only what you're willing to give to the relationship, but also what you expect to receive. Now, when you exchange these lists with your partner, chances are as you read through, you're going to see some information that doesn't exactly match up well. Or they may have included information you forgot, or vice versa. Now, this is a critical process where you need to talk through issues that could arise to make sure you're on the same page on how we can effectively navigate those situations. So some things you're going to want to think about is, how often do you expect to meet? When you do get together, how long will those meetings last? Who's going to initiate the meeting? And how are we going to connect when we do meet together? You can imagine if one person came into the relationship expecting 4 one-hour face-to-face meetings each month, and the other partner came in thinking, oh, we'll do a half-hour video conference call this month. That different expectation could lead one person maybe to feel some frustration. So that's kind of giving you an idea of why you need to talk through these. The second thing that's helpful to talk about is confidentiality. Now, obviously, your mentor is a resource for you, but your mentor also has a network of resources that they may be able to open up and provide access for you. And so some questions you need to think about is, are we allowed to share the information that we have in some of our mentoring discussions? And if so, who do we feel comfortable sharing that with? And do we need to have the expectation or agreement that we will ask permission before we share any of our discussions with someone else? In terms of the type of assistance that's desired, it helps the mentor to know what you're looking for. Am I looking for technical help? Am I looking for help on the interpersonal side? Do I need help with my technological skills? Or maybe am I looking for help with my organizational skills? There's a variety of ways to go, but we want to make sure that both parties are looking to both give and receive the information that they expect. And then finally, anticipated outcomes. If we're looking 6 months down the line, a year down the line, how are we going to know that we've been successful? What specific goals do we want to lay out for this relationship? And that's, again, something that's very helpful to do early on because it helps provide a framework that you all can follow as you move the relationship forward in that first series of meetings. Once you and your partner sit down, discuss expectations, what we're going to ask you to do is to fill out a mentoring covenant. You need to have a reminder of what commitment you've made to your partner and what you're committed to doing. You're going to sign it, and that's just going to kind of serve as a guide for you moving forward. Now that you and your mentoring partner have your mentoring covenant in place, we'd like to give you some tools to help you have a successful relationship. Now, one thing that's going to help you navigate this relationship is to have both of you think back on previous professional experiences that have been either favorable or unfavorable. Now, what I'd like you to do now is I'd like to start out on the positive side. I'd like you to take about 5 or 10 minutes to reflect on previous mentoring experiences where you've been working with someone else and you found your time with them to be really informative and helpful. Now, in some upcoming slides, you're going to see some strategies that'll help you navigate this relationship to maximize its success. Okay, first of all, just for a quick overview on strategies for success. What you'll see on this next slide is, one, you have to think about what can you do to be an effective listener. That is critical. Probably your most important skill as a mentor early on is making sure you're listening and hearing what that protege really needs from you. The second thing that's important as a mentor and also as a protege is to know how to ask the right questions. You know, our tendency when we want to help someone is we want to jump in and give advice, and sometimes give it right away and sometimes give it unsolicited. And the way we give advice, it's not only the content of the advice, it's the timing, the delivery, and how we go about that process. And then finally, you'll want to be familiar with some ways that you can keep your protege motivated and engaged. To start out, let's talk about effective listening. And the first bullet point you see up there is demonstrate empathy, not sympathy. So when you're listening to them and you're trying to get a feel for their background, what they've been through, and where they're trying to get, you know, as they describe frustrations, one thing we do not want to hear is sympathy. An example of that is, "Oh, I feel sorry for you. That's a shame." We don't want to pity them. When we say demonstrate empathy, an example of that would be, "I've experienced that situation too, and I understand how you would feel and how that might be frustrating for you." So you're connecting with them, but you're not throwing a pity party. The next thing you need to think about is, don't assume you know what the protege needs. You don't want to do that because you may assume wrong. In your first couple of meetings, as a mentor, you need to spend more time listening than talking to make sure you know exactly how you can help that protege the most. It helps to be an active listener. And so we want to paraphrase periodically to make sure that we are hearing the message the way the protege intends us to hear that. And then the last two things, you know, sometimes for whatever reason, maybe it's been a rough day, maybe it's been a long day, if you feel yourself drifting, it's really important you stay intently focused on the protege. And proteges, if you feel like there's not a connection or maybe somebody's drifting, call them on that and make sure you're both coming to the table with full attention. The other thing you may or may not have thought of up front, when you do schedule these meetings, be intentional about the setting. Where are you going to be when you're meeting or talking together? Minimize the distractions so that focus on each other is easier to have. Asking the right questions. That's not something we always give a lot of thought to, but it's critical. One thing that will really help you foster the relationship, particularly if you're working with someone that may be a little bit more introverted or likes time to process before sharing, one thing you can do as an effective mentor is set up a context where they know questions are on the way. And so what I mean by that is you might say, well, in a couple minutes, I'm going to ask you to reflect on your current work environment and what you find invigorating or maybe restrictive or something else. So, you know, be thinking about that as we're talking and you're sharing some of your initial background and where you'd like to go. When we ask questions of clarification, it's important to start with words like what, when, where, or how. What we want to avoid is don't start questions with why. If I start a question, let's say I'm talking to my colleague Doug, and I say, "Why did you do that?" Your intention is not to pass judgment, but anytime we use the word why, it suggests that there's some type of evaluation or maybe we thought you did something wrong. Now, a minute ago I talked about paraphrasing. One way to paraphrase is go from a general statement and take that to a specific statement. So an example of that would be, so when you say your company has a restrictive environment, are you suggesting that your supervisor fails to delegate to you or empower you? Another way you could do that would be going from a specific statement and moving to a general statement. So an example of that would be, so when you say you're frustrated with your supervisor's failure to delegate, does that get at a larger frustration that you don't feel trusted in your current environment? And then the final strategy you could use with paraphrasing is to restate in opposite terms. So an example of that would be, so if I understand you correctly, you would be a much more engaged worker if your supervisor offered opportunities for you to take on more responsibility. Okay, and then the final thing I'll say here, and you're probably already aware of it, is ask questions that force them to elaborate. If you just ask simple yes or no questions, that's probably what you're going to get. So think thoughtfully about asking the question where it forces them to give a little bit more thought and detail in their responses. The art of offering advice. Number one, never offer unsolicited advice. Why? Because they may not be ready to take it. It's very simple to approach someone to see if they're ready for some advice. I've been in that situation before too. I've got a couple of things that work for me, and I also tried a few strategies that didn't work that well. Would you like me to share some of that information with you? So again, you're opening it up so that they're ready to let you know whether or not it's a good time to share advice. Another thing to remember is we're not trying to change a person. So anytime you're offering ideas for them to improve their effectiveness, be clear that you are talking about particular behaviors you're witnessing or they're describing, and you're talking about how those behaviors could hold them back, not how they as a person are doing something wrong. Before somebody's going to be willing to take ideas or suggestions, they have to agree with you that the behaviors you're talking about, they can see why that behavior might be problematic. So you might say, when you jump in and cut off a colleague or a team member or a supervisor in the middle of a thought, can you see how that might offend them? Or do you see how that might cut the conversation short in a way that you don't fully evaluate or explore opportunities? Now, then once they agree, oh, I can see how that behavior is problematic, now they're ready for you to jump in and offer some thoughts based on your experience. When you offer suggestions to your partner, I suggest you do that in the first person. And what I mean by first person is, what helped me become more proficient in that area, and then continue on with however you would fill in that sentence. Ultimately, what you want your protege to understand is you're not perfect. You've made mistakes too, and you're here to try and help them avoid some of the mistakes you made. When they see you as human and vulnerable too, the way it helps your relationship is they're more likely to see you as approachable. So build that connection by showing that you too have encountered challenges. And then finally, as a mentor, you're going to offer ideas, but what feels comfortable or works for you may not be a good fit all the time for your protege. So it's important for you to let them know, hey, I'm going to give you a variety of ideas. Some of them you may take, some of them might not feel that good to you. Ultimately, the choice is yours on whether you choose to adopt a particular advice. How do we motivate our proteges? If they feel like you believe in them and you support them and you want them to be successful, that's going to invigorate them. Be genuine in your praise. When praise is genuine, it's very powerful. Make the protege feel part of a bigger family. I mean, not only are you developing a relationship with them, but give them strategies on how to develop within their team, how to develop within their particular facility. Help them think about how they're part of the larger group that is your healthcare organization. Provide direction. Oftentimes they're eager to do well, and all they need you to do is give them some ideas about how they can best direct their energy and efforts. You know, parents oftentimes want to protect their children, and you hear the term helicopter parenting, where you kind of hover over them and don't let them experiment or try anything by themselves. You are not doing your protege a favor by doing that. The best way to build confidence in that protege is give them some responsibility, give them some opportunities to explore and develop. When they see you trusting them with more responsibility, they are going to feel more confident in themselves. And then finally, when you see your protege doing something that is taking them on the right track, affirm when they perform well. Give them that positive feedback. All right, we've spent some time now talking about some strategies that you can use to help your relationship be successful. I'd like you to go through one more period of reflection as you think about tools that may help move your mentoring relationship on its most optimal path. Now this time what I want you to do is think about it from the other side. Think about situations or relationships that have been unsuccessful. Specifically, if you're in a situation where someone was trying to mentor you or help you and it was not successful. Hopefully these next slides, as we talk about some pitfalls you want to avoid, will help you move forward with your ACHCA mentoring relationship in an optimal way. Some common mistakes. The "I can help you" syndrome. When the mentor says, "I can help you," it may cause the protege to think, "Oh gosh, now I'm indebted to this person." We don't want that. The "I know what's best for you, do what I do," okay, that can come off as arrogant. Don't criticize or pass judgment. And it doesn't mean don't push them to reflect and think about how they could do something differently, but when you immediately come in with criticism, the problem there is it's probably going to maybe hurt the extent to which they feel trusted or that you're trustworthy and that they can open up. The final bullet point is the one that I want to spend the most time on. It's the biggest mistake you can create, and that is creating dependence in the relationship. So what are some comments that would lead to this scenario that we don't want to see? Follow my lead or my directions and you will be fine. Don't worry about it. I will take care of you. Let me help you navigate these shark-infested waters. If you stick with me, you'll go far. Now again, none of those comments is malicious. You're not trying to lead them in a bad direction. But all those things lead the protege to think, oh, as long as my mentor is here with me, I'm going to be great. But what happens when you retire? What happens when you get another job offer you can't refuse? Now your protege is thinking, uh-oh, I'm up the creek without a paddle. The ultimate goal of mentoring, as we put this established leader with this emerging leader, is when you are finished with this formal relationship of mentor-protege, that protege is going to be a self-sufficient, independent contributor. Okay? And what I mean by that is they walk away from that relationship thinking, wow, I've been given the tools that I need to be able to navigate any situation I might come up with and navigate that situation in an effective way. For the purposes of today, I just wanted to introduce you to the SAGE model. This is a model of mentoring that was formulated by Chip Bell. And what you can see in this slide is what that acronym stands for. The S is for surrendering. Particularly early in the relationship, you want to create a level playing field where you truly feel like that person that's with you is your partner. So you try to take power or authority out of the relationship. So just talk to them as, hey, we're two people coming together with the same ideas. We've kind of laid out this covenant. Let's work together to successfully accomplish these goals. The A is for accepting. And the key thing there is to learn about your partner, embrace what they've been through, embrace where they're going, but again, do not judge. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? How do you envision that happening? What can I do to help? So think about how you start those conversations. The G is for gifting. Your mentoring relationship is going to work because both of you are giving and receiving something from the relationship. But at the same time, understand when you as a mentor bestow a gift on your protege, and what I mean by a gift is that gift could be some knowledge you've had, some thoughts about mistakes to avoid, some strategies that have been successful for them, some resources you can give them access to facilitate their success as an administrator. And finally, the E is for extending. You're going to spend a lot of time in sessions where you're talking to your protege, discussing, what their challenges are, where they want to go, etc. But ultimately understand as they become that independent learner, there may be some times where you need to give them a little nudge to go beyond their comfort zone, to extend beyond boundaries, to maximize their full potential. A couple of tricky situations that you may or may not be put into, but it's helpful to think about all of these. Again, we said earlier we match based on location. We're going to try to put you as close to someone as possible. However, there may be times where you need to mentor from a remote location. So a few things that you want to remember about that. First of all, find somebody on site with that protege that can serve as a buddy or surrogate, somebody that can be there to answer questions where maybe you can't be around. The other thing to do, even if you're not in the same geographic location, it's really nice to send learning packages on a periodic basis. So what might you include in a learning package? Send them a copy of an article you read. Stick in the mail a book that you found helpful in your leadership development. There's a lot of little things you can do in these learning care packages to help them know you're right there with them, even if you're not physically in the same place. And also work with that protege to create a self-directed learning plan so they feel like they have direction between meetings, even if you're not there. What do you do if your boss asks you to mentor them on something? Maybe you're a technological expert and they need help on some new hardware or software you're not familiar with. What are going to be some challenges with that? Probably one of the biggest ones is the protege does not want their teammates and colleagues thinking they're sucking up to the boss to get some type of unfair advantage. So if you're in that situation where the employee or direct report is mentoring the boss, make sure that the supervisor has clearly established that they initiated that relationship, they asked for it, and that's why it came about. Again, also to have good interactions there, you gotta again try to eliminate the power and status differences. So think carefully about how you do that. What if you're asked to mentor a peer? Well, one way to make that work well is to build on your shared experiences where you're helping them learn about a particular area. When you're mentoring peers, a couple of things to be real careful about. Just like we said earlier, don't be that helicopter hovering over them. If you jump in and rescue a coworker, they're going to likely be embarrassed or feel bad, particularly if you do it in front of others. Also, when you're offering praise, give praise. Do not give conditional praise. What I mean by conditional praise would be if you said, you did a nice job on completing that task, but you would have been more effective if you had fill in the blank. That word but can be very derailing in a mentoring relationship. So some general rules of thumb when mentoring in tricky situations. 1, act with humility. If you're boastful or act with arrogance, that's going to turn people off. Just like we said earlier, regardless of the situation, when we are mentoring, we ask lots of questions early on and listen. We're doing more listening than talking. And one thing, a key strategy for success when mentoring is when you feel resistance in the room, don't ignore it, address it head on. If there's a white elephant in the room, it's not going to disappear unless you get it out in the open and talk about it. So if somebody's not happy with how a situation is going, address that resistance head on. Finally, let's talk a little bit about, we spent a lot of this webinar talking about how you get the relationship started, how you get off on a fast and successful start. At some point, this relationship's going to come to an end. Now, when I say the relationship's going to come to an end, I don't mean that your mentor or protege is going to no longer be part of your expanded network. What I mean is just the formal mentor-protege relationship will end and the nature of your relationship will change. The first one is you're having difficulty coming up with an agenda for the session, where it used to become very easily, you had clear goals and you knew what you were working for. Another thing that a mentor may feel is, I'm not sure what else I have to offer. Now, anytime you reach goals, you accomplish them, that's great. You do have an option to think about, is there additional goals we would like to accomplish? And if you think of additional goals, then obviously the relationship can continue. But at some point, one, the other, or both are going to come to the table and say, I don't know what else I have that I can give to the relationship. You find yourself in mentoring situations where you're looking at your watch or your phone and thinking, wow, there's about 10 or 12 or 15 other things I could be doing right now. That's a big sign that it's time to come to close. Another thing you may fear as a mentor is, I think this person is ready to fly, and if we keep this formal relationship, I think they may fall into a pattern of dependence, and we don't want that. Something that might bring a relationship to a close earlier in terms of, less time gone by is if there's been a breach of trust. If there's been a breach of trust, oftentimes it's hard to repair that, particularly in a situation or a relationship where full disclosure is really needed to maximize the relationship. A relationship may also start to feel one-sided. And if it's no longer mutually beneficial, rather than resent the relationship, if you don't feel like you're getting something out of it, be open and honest about that. And like I said a minute ago, if you've accomplished all your goals, that's great. It's probably time to move on. Now, this coming to a close does not have to be a negative event. If you've made strides, if you've hit all your goals, if you've done what you hope to do in your relationship, well, what do you need to do? Real simple. Have closure by celebrating the success of that relationship. Celebrate, 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 and then reinforce. We're always there as a contact for the other person. We're just changing the nature of the relationship. Okay, as you're coming to a close, some of these next slides will identify contact information, resources, things that you can find online at the ACHCA website. And again, thank you for being part of this program. We wish you all the best in the program and hope you're off to a good start with your mentor or protege.